Hello everyone. I, Archana Bera, on behalf of Kalinga Literary Festival, would like to welcome you all to today's session of Bhava Samvad on the book Calling Elvis by Shantanu Datta. So, taking ahead today's session, let's welcome our today's guest, Shantanu Datta, author of the book Calling Elvis and senior editor, The Telegraph Online. Ashish Ghatak, author of the book Louis Banks, A Symphony of Love. And we have with us Shobana P. Matthews, Associate Professor and HOD of English and Cultural Studies in Christ University, Bangalore. Therefore, taking a quick brief on the book Calling Elvis, I would like to say that the book compiles for the first time the detailed interviews taken by Shantanu Datta conducted with seminal artists like Roger Waters, Ian Anderson, Martin Barre, and many others. His candid, informed conversations with these enduring legends provide a rare glimpse into the minds of those trailblazers who influenced the entire generations with their music. Calling Elvis is an absolute treat for musicians and music lovers everywhere. Therefore, now I would request Shantanu sir to take ahead today's session. Thank you.
Thank you, Archana, and thank you, Kalinga Lit Fest, for having us. Let me first introduce you to our panelists. We have Shobna Matthews. She is a teacher, as you just heard, but she is a very interesting teacher. She has done her PhD on the music of Mark Knopfler, former band leader of a band called the Dire Straits, which all of us know. And she's also done a MPhil dissertation on Bob Dylan as a protest singer. So we will be hearing a lot about her work, uh, vis-a-vis, we sort of take off on my book, but then the whole discussion will sort of veer around her work because it's very interesting. You rarely have an academic, treating music with a kind of seriousness and love and joy with which music should be treated. Then we have Ashish Ghatak. He's a familiar face to our viewers, I'm sure. He was here just about weeks ago. He's written a book on Louis Banks, his biography. And Ashish is an R.D. Burman fan, a teacher himself. He teaches at a school, he teaches English. He's written several books too. And lovely to have you, Ashish. Lovely to have you,
Thank
Shobna.
you.
And today we'll talk a little bit about my book, but the whole idea being I hope that we will answer some fundamental questions. Is that why people like us, the three of us, love writing about music? I mean, why not just sort of listen to it and dance to it or whatever and sort of let it be? But we chose to write on music. Why do we do that? And music is always associated with some kind of memories, happy and sad, both for us listeners and for the performer. And though the nuances of those emotions may differ, but it's a very emotional experience for people who love music. So we would like to explore these questions while we'll talk about our book. So so I think I'll there won't be any moderator in this conversation. It'll be like an adda. It'll be like a conversation between three friends. We'll discuss music and of course wherever my book fits in, Calling Elvis: Conversations with Some of Music's Greatest, a Personal History. So Shobna, can I sort of ask you to fire away and we can sort of start?
So thank you, Kalinga Litfest, and the two of you for having me on this panel along with you. This for me is a very exciting moment because of late there's suddenly an interest in music as text in the academic world. And for the longest time, like I've been saying to you in our conversations, I've always felt like a bit of an outcast. The accidental academic, the hippie who wandered into a university. But of late, I'm seeing a lot of interesting work being done. Younger scholars working on sound, music, spatiality, city studies, and things like that. And finally, I think the moment has come, where we are taking it seriously. And I'm guessing it's high time because, in this multi-sensory world that we live in, the digital world, it's important to understand various ways of understanding a text, perceiving a text. And which is why it was very exciting for me when I read your book And the one I'm in the process of reading, Ashish's book, it's fascinating because I was seeing a totally different world of the musicians themselves, because my own work concentrates on the text, the music, the lyric, and this was exciting. So I really want to know some of the what prompted you to write these books, especially because in this day and age when everything is commercial, and I'm not necessarily against things being commercial, but there's always does an audience want to read a book like this? And both of you have successfully answered that, and it's a resounding yes. So would you like to answer that for me? Like, what made you do this, take this book forward?
Yeah, the idea struck me sometime in 2016-17 at the cusp, and where there was this huge concert happening in the States pre-COVID, and you used to have big concerts then. 3 day, 2 week, over 2 weekends, three giants of rock music: Roger Waters, Paul McCartney, Neil Young, the Rolling Stones, and Bob Dylan played over 2 weekends. And we may have missed somebody. And and later on, I read about it on Rolling Stone magazine and watched a few videos, and it sort of struck me that Roger Waters was in India in sometime
Hmm.
between 2000 and 2003, and he's come here twice. So has the Rolling Stones. And this is happening more than a decade in the States again, and still here I am. I'm glued into my systems and trying to figure out what they sang. They sang these old songs, and Rolling Stones did a Beatles song. It's called "Come Together," and they called it. This song is by an unknown beat group. So let's see if you can realize which this is. So that got me thinking that what is it that about these songs and these performers? One, the fact that they're all granddads. They're about 75 and above. They're rock star granddads, and it's an amazing thing to see them perform on stage with the energy, believe it or not, seemingly as energetic as they were when they were in their prime in their younger days. So that was one. And the second one was a very fundamental question, basic question as to why we keep coming back to this kind of music. Of course, obviously, there is some resonance. Is it just a nostalgia? Is it just a nostalgia, or do the lyrics, mean something to us? And the meanings change. The lyrics, we don't need no education, meant something when we were in school. It means something to me now when I have my daughters and you have your son and daughter going to school, and they come back with their questions. So it's an amazing thing. A song written in the 70s, still having resonance, still being performed by the same people. And that's when I said, let me just sort of look back on these old interviews that I had and try and find out if they made sense or if at all. And I did. I spoke to a few of my friends. There was one particular one, a senior journalist, a very good friend of mine, and he sort of encouraged me a lot. And he said, yes, this makes very interesting and reading. The very fact that they were all here and you were there and you were able to meet them. And personally, it's like a cricket fan getting to meet the stalwarts of the game, from the giants of the game from the West Indies and to Indian cricketers and English and the Australian cricketers. So I used to hear records of these guys, and we have a few at home, and their sort of names leapt out when I met them, that from those center circles, and it was just an amazing and emotional feeling that to have met each one of them. And they were very nice, very articulate. I did not, of course, have the privilege of having an equal amount of time with all of them, but I sort of hung in there. And I also luckily found myself there in Bombay when I was working in Bombay. You had Wayne Shorter and Herbie Hancock coming and performing, and I managed to meet them. And Weather Report was a band that I had heard as a in college, and so it was just and they most of them are very surprised, very very surprised that here's this kid from India, and kid, I say kid, I wasn't a kid, but he said that you guys, how is it that you I said, well, you'd be surprised. It's like what Dizzy Gillespie told Louis Banks when they met, and
Yeah, I
Louis
remember
Banks
that. I remember.
introduced. You remember
Yeah,
that, right, Ashish? And he said,
yeah,
"I am a piano player, jazz pianist from India." So Dizzy Gillespie's first reaction to that, oh, they have jazz piano in India. They have jazz in India. So so if not to break such bits, that I thought, and just to sort of compile them, but of course, the book, as you now, the way it has come, there is a story behind it in the sense it's. The form it has taken, we will talk about it later. But I initially just planned it as pure interviews of these 25, 35 people. But then it sort of morphed itself into trying to include all the musicians that I sort of was able to interact with and whom I consider I consider really great for various reasons. Yes, so that's how it started. Ashish, tell me.
Yeah, the thing. See, when I read the book, definitely I didn't know Chandru Datta when I read the book, but the very name of the book and the looks of the book is very enticing. Immediately, I just pounced on the book when I was going to the bookstore in the nearby shopping mall there. And when I was reading through the book, uh, it gave me a feeling like that. Yesterday, I was reading the book once more, that as if I am going through a lane, a walker, or maybe a jaywalker, you can say, who there is no risk of being punished. He is walking through a musical lane. From one window, a Baul song is coming. Two steps ahead, from another window, a Rabindra Sangit is coming. Some steps ahead, maybe a Harvey Hancock, maybe John McLaughlin. And at the end of the road, there is a Usha Huttup and Asha Vosley blaring out Hare Rama Hare Krishna song. So this has got such a kaleidoscopic effect, such a heterogeneous elements, heterogeneous genre of music streamlined into one book. It gave us such a beautiful feeling. And now, when I'm talking to Shantanuda, I just feel that when you were recording those, when interviewing those people, I wonder whether you had any plan of compiling those interviews into a book. So, how did it actually materialize that you are interviewing today, and some years after, all the interviews are collated and it is taking a shape of a book, which is such a great treat for us? How did it happen?
No, it's very very interesting. These interviews were all standalone solo pieces for the newspaper that I used to work in during those times. In Bangalore, I was there for 4 years. That's when Jean-Luc Ponty and all this big. I was working for the New Indian Express, so I wrote for them, and they were just standalone pieces and interviews. There was no way I had imagined that this would one day become a book, and so the thought never crossed my mind, never. And I just, I mean, they were there. I heard their names, and I had to rush and somehow or the other, go and get to meet them and talk to them and get some time. And so that's number one. And this lovely image that you drew about walking down a Calcutta street with music coming out from various home windows is so true. This is something which I didn't realize while I was writing the book, but later on when it was finished, I realized that this is who we are. This is exactly who we are. Shobna has grown up in Calcutta early in her younger days. Then she moved. You and I are fortunate. We spent most of our lives in Calcutta. Even though I left and I was away from Calcutta working years for about 1.5 decades or 2 decades. But somehow, and this is about India. I think I really feel that our ability to absorb various kinds of music, various strains of music and thought is it's in our DNA. I don't know, it's a default setting. We can hear Rabindra Sangeet, and in fact it's pujas now, and where I am, they are playing Rabindra Sangeet just now in the background, because today is the day when my home housing complex Pujo is going to be inaugurated, and they've been playing Rabindra Sangeet from the beginning, and then interspersed with Kishore Kumar songs, Bangla songs, and these are songs that we grew up with. So,
Absolutely.
and and I think it's the same. I mean, I've seen it in Bombay, I've seen it in Bangalore. That Shobna's sons, she tells me, are musicians. They will relate to this. They hear all kinds of music, and it's never. I mean, it's so natural to absorb, and it's so natural to sort of this collaboration and this kind of synthesis, this secular nature of our receptacles, if I may say that. It's very very natural. So it's we are open to all kinds of music, and I think that's what it is. And since I've grown up in Calcutta, I'll dare say that yes, Calcutta does this to you. You have Calcutta in the 70s. You have a guy like Dilip Balakrishnan playing rock music, his own original music in the 70s, one of the first bands ever in the country to, he and High, and before that. And then across town, you have a band called Mohiner Ghoraguli who did
Yeah.
Bangla music, Bangla rock. They sang rock music in Bangla, again original tunes. So, and they are the guys like you and me, grown up with Hindi film songs, grown up with a little bit of classical and a little bit of Beatles and Shadows and Ventures, and but they chose to absorb all that, and they chose to sing in Bangla and create their own music, which was rooted to Calcutta and rooted to the realities of Calcutta. So I think this is the big discovery that I had. You don't need to discover it. It was so natural that you don't ever thought that you need to overstate this. But then that's what it is. We have come to such a state that we need to sort of stress these credentials that
Hmm.
we are open to influences from all sides. We just naturally imbibe this, and that's what I think happened while at the end of the book.
It's a very
Shobna.
And
interesting.
how about it took? Yeah, tell Shobana.
No, no, I was just fascinated by your analogy of the street, walking through the street with the open windows, because that's a very literary technique, I mean, in the sense that it reminded me of something as archaic. Well, we still teach this in our university classes, the Chaucerian idea of the frame narrative, So
Okay.
there's so
Yeah,
much happening, and each frame has its little, adds to that heterogeneity that you were talking about, and doesn't detract from, and the music becomes what holds the whole thing together. And I think
Right.
absolutely true.
Absolutely.
Absolutely
evident
Right.
in
true.
your book. So it reminded me of that when you talked about the windows. A very beautiful image
Yeah,
to sum
and
that up.
when Shantanu gave the introduction that you grew up with that Nodi song, the river song, Nodi upon Bege,
Yes. Nodi
that
upon bege
yeah,
pagul pada. Yes.
Pavalpada. And when I personally remember the afternoon days in my childhood days in the afternoon, that Unrudha Rashor, that Unrudha Rashor,
Yes.
yeah, so the request songs. So
Is an
the musical
All
band.
India radio program Onulodher Ashor, which is a program of requests. So people would write
Yeah,
in,
so
and they
Hmm.
would play the songs which listeners would want. Yes, please carry on.
correct, correct, correct. Then the musical bandbox, of course.
Yes.
Evening without musical bandbox. Then the lunchtime variety from the
Yes.
Jugobani station. So
Correct.
everything coming together. So it is absolutely a fact that we invite the things naturally. What we liked more and what we disliked is very difficult to differentiate. That this we like more, this will come at the second. So your book testifies to that open-mindedness, that the same way we accept a Baul song, in the very same love and predilection we will go into Herbie Hancock. So
Correct.
that is the example of that heterogeneity in our culture and the love for music. This is absolutely
Yes.
true. But what makes your book apart is the format, Shantanuda.
Okay.
That I really what else I feel intrigued that there are so many books what else in the circuit, that the books are based on the conversations. There are some books on the conversations with the subjects of the biography, and biographies are galore. Definitely not, as Shona told, that it's now gradually coming in vogue. Not many biographies were there, or many works on music, where academic works were there before. But you have fused these two genres, part of conversation, part of the slice of the subject's biography, and you have fused it, bridged it with your own words. And that is something really unique. And you just throw light. How did it happen? Was it somebody's idea, or did you uh, give them
Well,
come up with it?
as I was just saying that, I started off with the idea that I had these 20 interviews of these big names, and I thought I'll just go to the publishers and say that, we'll write a book and have them published. And I didn't want to put anything personal in the book because I really didn't think it apt to talk about my choice of music amongst a conversation with the greats. I mean, if L. Subramaniam talks about playing the violin and the influence, people like uh, his uh, his guru and all, and the people, other violin players have had on him, Jean-Luc Ponty, and he's done this the name forgets. I forget the name. And then there's John McLaughlin. He plays with Shakti. So how does it matter that I'm going to write that I grew up with this, and I like. Of course, I love John McLaughlin, and I like El Subramaniam. So that was my thinking, that I should just keep myself out of it, because these are the greats talking. Let them talk, and see how much I. But ultimately, the publishers who were willing to publish, which is Speaking Tiger, Ravi Singh of Speaking Tiger, and he sort of liked the idea, but he said, you got to bring a little bit about yourself, about why are you writing the book. And he said, unless you do that, it's not going to work, which was a shock to me, because I thought any of these great speaking the way they do, it would work as a book for an audience, or at least for music lovers. And I gave it a thought, and I tried sort of, started off by putting the context of how I got to meet them. Where was I, what was happening around at that time. I was very scared. I didn't think I could pull it off. And then I thought I would sort of intersperse, and that's how it sort of started. And when the Dilip's chapter, which is the first chapter on Dilip Balakrishnan and High, it's very personal, and that's, I sort of started with that, because that's my earliest memory of learning music, and learning to appreciate different kinds of music. So there is a link to one song, "A Day in the Life of Beatles," which I used to play when I was in college, and Dilip had played it, and when I had heard it, it just sort of blew me away, and I didn't even know one person could sing that song, because there's an orchestra backing in that song. So anyway, so that's how it started. And after doing a few chapters, I ran it by Ravi, and Ravi is a man of few words. He didn't say he didn't like it, so so I was a bit
You took it in the
emboldened. I
positive
thought,
way.
yeah.
Nice,
So
lovely.
I sort of went on, and then ultimately it sort of fell into
Wonderful.
place.
And Shantnuda, it happened that the fluent way you wrote, actually, as if I could liken myself, I could relate myself. Had I been in your place, I would have written the same way. This is how the people fascinated me. So, actually, just one more question before I would ask Shovana to speak on something on this. That why calling Elvis? Why that particular number is taken for the title of the book?
Oh well. Firstly, it's a damn good song. I took to the song the moment
Yeah,
I read it, and
yeah,
I sort of learnt it. And the spirit of the song is Mark Knopfler's fanboy tribute to Elvis. I mean, and it is a very pure tribute. This is not nostalgia. This is nothing. This is simply the music connecting a listener to the singer. In Mark Knopfler's case, he's a musician too, but he's written that song as if he's a musician stroke listener, a guy who's grown up listening to Elvis, just like
yeah.
you and I have, and he's the king. So the lyrics really moved me, and I thought, and Mark Knopfler says that simple is very difficult, and I thought in very simple words he was able to sort of convey that, and I thought that best encompasses the spirit in which did I tried to write the book. I
Excellent,
started,
wonderful.
so I'll just read out those lines. I mean, just look at
Please,
this.
please.
Well, tell him I was calling just to wish him well. Let me leave my number, Heartbreak Hotel. Oh, love me tender, baby, don't be cruel. Return to sender, treat me like a fool. Calling Elvis, is anybody home? I mean, that line, those lines just say
Wonderful.
everything. Just say everything.
Yeah,
It is when just music connects to individuals. It's just amazing. It's universal. It was just it sort of touched me deeply. It still does when I sort of hear the song. Every time I hear the song, it does something. It's an amazing song.
excellent. Yeah.
That's
So
the reason.
when we border our discussion on Mark Knopfler, you just carry it on to Shobana.
Yes. So now we are on the subject of Mark Knopfler. Let me just remind our listeners and viewers that she's done extensive work on Mark Knopfler songs. So Shobna, I'd like to hear from you how you chose Mark Knopfler, what exactly is your thesis on, and explain it to us a bit in detail. So it's very, very interesting. Please.
Uh, Thank you, Shantanu, for asking me. I'm trying to get my thoughts together because it's exciting. I've been told for the last 20 odd years not to be a fangirl, but to be a researcher. But somehow it doesn't seem to, I don't seem to need to do that now. So I can be all fan here. So, I've been absolutely enchanted with his music from the time. And both Dylan and Knopfler were musicians I discovered largely for myself, not through friends or radios and things like that. From my stint at Chennai, where I studied, did my undergraduate days. But Chennai was a very, fertile area for music in the 80s and 90s. Some of the and my seniors from college were some great musicians, friends I had at various colleges like Loyola, and the college fest scene was very lively then. Brilliant musicians. Some of
Yeah,
them
yeah.
still in the field of music. And Knopfler, particularly for me, was very interesting. The very first song album I heard was, of course, the Communique album and things like that. And it was interesting, particularly for both of you, because he has a writing tradition as a musician
Mm.
and a writer. He was a journalist as well. And it was exciting. And you asked me how I found Knopfler. It's really Knopfler found me. In the sense, because, when people asked me what I was going to do my PhD on, I knew I was going to do something with music. I had worked on Dylan, and it's that love-hate relationship when you have read a lot about a musician that you want to put it away for a while. And I felt at that stage in my life, I was young enough to believe I knew enough about Dylan, that which he's proved totally wrong right now by resurfacing with Shadow Kingdom and all of that.
Right, right.
Absolutely,
No,
busted
no,
all
no.
our.
Nobody knows Dylan. Sometimes I wonder even if he knows Dylan. Dylan himself knows what he
I
wants. Anyway,
don't think so.
nobody.
And
Well said.
that's the absolutely
Well said.
brilliant part about him. And then so Knopfler was in that sense very staid, British musician and all of this.
Right.
And both Mark Knopfler and Sting for me are fascinating because, as you said, and and you both were discussing the book in such detail, and the construction of the book. There's this sense of magnanimity that Knopfler has, and
Yes.
it fulfills a lot of literary traditions. For instance, this idea of calling Elvis, when you asked that question, I was wondering, was it not self evident? But then I realized that it actually has a strong sense of intertextuality because we are hearkening back to a tradition, where
Mm.
writers write from, and I was telling you the other day, some of the titles of his songs are straight out of, medieval literatures and things like both Sting and Knopfler. But then when I was looking at Mark Knopfler, I found that when I was listening to him at least, and it's interesting that you brought in radio programs and broadcast history a bit, because a lot of our music tastes were shaped by, we just had to, take what we got. Even if you sent in requests, I was never lucky. I sent in a lot of postcards. I never had my request paid. So I don't know what the radio stations had against me. But then the little bit of, crackling music that you heard on Radio Ceylon, Voice of America, BBC, and all of this, if you were lucky, was all that we had. And I know how prehistoric I sound when I say this. And just like, and Knopfler has created for me a certain idea of not just music, but particularly British music, and Newcastle and things like that. And it's interesting because, in today's world where we are trained to reject a lot of European traditions and look for indigenous music, somehow he doesn't do that. It's a beautiful, like I was saying, very magnanimous. And about choosing Knopfler, I wanted to work on something which would sustain my interest, be passionate, that I could be passionate about. And it was so much fun, like he says, that ain't working. That's the way you do it. Because for the
Right.
6 odd years that I spent researching my PhD, it never ever felt boring,
Mm.
And of course, there's a lot of paperwork which you do and all of that. But apart from that, sitting down to read, listening, and I also did a soundscape to demonstrate what I was doing. That sound creates spaces, and therefore Knopfler creates spaces, soundscapes through his music. It was exciting to say the least. And every time you listen to an album, I think a lot of Mark Knopfler's albums work like your book. They're chapters. Each song works as a chapter which opens on to a different style. So you have like from reggae to jazz and blues to even rock and roll, as in your jive music kind of thing. So, and you have these traditions across albums. You can actually categorize them. Like the Walk of Life, it resonates with Twisting by the Pool, a whole lot of these songs. And put them into one category. So there's no end to what you can do just with Knopfler's music, and I've just done a very little part of it, which is to establish that he creates a spatiality through his songs. So, of course, I had to use an architectural theorist to back this, to explain and to validate what spaces are and how one reads a space.
Okay.
Henri Lefebvre. So that was very, exciting for me, and all
Hmm.
of that. It seemed to have worked, I hope, at least.
Right. How did you come? How did you sort of? I mean, the tough part of a PhD is doing it, but I believe sometimes the toughest part is to choose your topic and to frame your topic
Yes.
first.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, who's the one you spoke to? Who was your guide, and how did you all sort of zero in on the topic on this?
Yes.
Huh.
So I had a guide who's absolutely brilliant, Dr. Nirmal Selvamani, who himself was a guitarist, played the guitar. Of course, his specialization is eco-criticism, and never once was he disappointed that I didn't choose his area. But he worked on Tamil poetics as well. It was
Okay.
very, and gave me the kind of freedom to choose. I did face a lot of flack from other parts of academia where I was asked why I was not working on indigenous music, why I would choose a European again, white,
Uh,
well, white man
Absolutely.
again. Kind of thing.
Right.
But
Right.
I hope that my writing and research went beyond that, that it was not
Yes.
reduced in that sense. So, well, we later used my findings. One of my students who did his MPhil worked on Raghu Dixit project, the Bangalore-based band, and he looked at the spaces created by, Bangalore music. And
Mm.
we have tremendous bands in Bangalore, Thermal Underwater, and all
Yes.
of these people. We are looking to work with them and actually write about them, much as what you've done for musicians in Calcutta. I hope we could also do, archive and bring these people to the forefront. So I
Right.
think that's how it worked. So
Okay. Okay. That's
you
that's
told me
that's
to
very interesting. That's Ashish. I mean, that is something, right? I mean,
Absolutely, absolutely.
it's
And this receiving the flack and the topic of receiving the flack is quite, what I'll say, amusing. So in the open platform, I should use the word amusing only,
correct.
because it's
Let's stick to amusing. I think that our listeners will know what you really mean.
exactly,
absolutely.
exactly. And yeah, almost the same question was what else thrown at me also. Why Louis Banks? So
Right.
it's very difficult to answer why Louis Banks and why not Louis
Why
Banks.
not?
So it's
Why not?
yeah, exactly,
Why not?
exactly.
So
So uh, hmm,
it's
tell me.
so that brings us to the obvious question about academia's relationship vis-a-vis with music. Uh, as you said, you don't like the word popular music, but music that touches our hearts. Let's just say, if music touches our hearts and we love it, why does academia always shy away from doing research or work, delving deeper into someone's music? For instance, J.J. Cale, a fascinating guitarist, a father of rock and roll music. I mean, there's more to rock and roll than just sex and drugs, right? I mean,
Yes.
Of
we are
course.
old enough now, and we
Yeah.
realize that we listen to it for
Mm,
the music and for the joy and the
mm,
complexity and the musicianship. So,
mm.
why do you think academia is so standoffish about music as such?
I think the answer is in your question itself. I think rock and roll has this smoke screen put up there of drug, sex, and all the noise and all the decadence which goes seems to go with it. And the lives of the rock stars are pretty. You have people like driving cars off buildings into swimming pools
Right.
and things like that. But these are the stories that we hear, and now there's a lot of other movements which are catching up with the decadence of rock and roll, but that has kept serious researchers away. In a way, I remember when I was reading about Dylan and wondering why there was not more work done on Dylan, considering, I mean, I felt I was doing something redundant because his poetry speaks for itself.
Exactly.
So basically all I had to do was join the dots. Here's some Eliot, here's some, all the famous British, very staid academic poets whom nobody would question. I just had to put them alongside Dylan, and there were points when we were confused, like who's who and things like that. And that was my point, and I am quite formalist in that sense. So I'd done that. But like you said, why? In fact, even when I'm at the university, very few of us will venture into the Western music competitions and things, when the rock bands take the stage. And I think it works both ways. The musicians are happy that we are not around because then the lyrics are uncensored, the joy and all that is there. And except for a few like me who will, worm my way in there, the rest of us are quite happy not to go to give it a wide berth. And I think that's where the mistake is, because we are losing out, reams and reams of poetry and art. There's, and very often when I play music for little talks that I do or presentations, one of my colleagues very astutely pointed out, you're playing very staid stuff, sedate kind of music. So I said, yeah, because if I played you kind of some of the music that I like, and which is more hard hitting and packs a stronger punch, you'd probably tune out, and not want to listen to it further because you'd be put off by the expletives and everything. Not like there's that much, even. I think I've just grown a thick skin to all of this. And if we're talking about anger and anti-establishment critiques, why would you expect that kind of language which is so sanitized in that sense?
Absolutely.
Or
Correct.
performances
Correct.
which are sanitized, right? I
Correct.
mean, don't get that, but then it's slowly getting there. I think, one thing which happens is, even recently, I was watching a little video on Facebook where a teacher in a rural school was teaching math using folk music, and the whole class
Wow.
of tiny, little kids, about 6 and 7 year old, the class was noisy. Everyone was dancing. I was so excited. Like, I wish I'd been taught math like this. Probably be teaching mathematics then. But interestingly, the comments, which is where the real discussion happens, there's so many teachers, I'm guessing my age and or older, who kept saying things like, what about the decorum? What kind of learning is happening here?
My God.
And I think sometimes we just need to loosen up. I was telling you about Dylan. Auden himself said, shook his newspaper very snobbishly and said, haven't got down to reading or listening to him. That's about all. There's this little uh, I think it comes from what will happen if we open these floodgates, when we have to now replace a lot of our texts with sound text, because the music punctuates, a lot of the instrumentation punctuates the lyric. And we will have to, move out of our comfort zones, which is happening too. There are teachers. I have a colleague who's working on using music, Dr. Samuel, is using music to teach English.
Right.
He chooses very simple for rural areas again. So I think it's getting there, but we'll have to be patient, a lot more patient.
Okay.
One thing to add to that before I shut up about it is, I think we're also used to a lot of, in India, we listen, our early days of listening to music begins with film music. And film music has a very clear visual attached and a storyline attached. So to listen to this disembodied song, which is not, I'm not talking about music videos here. Like when you listen to a song which does not necessarily have a music video, or you haven't seen the music video, it's like being thrown into the deep end. The
Right.
accents, the instrumentation, the rhythms, all of this. So it requires a shift or an acceptance of a certain taste.
Yes.
And I think if
And
we
it
have
requires certain degree of attention too, a little more attention than you
absolutely.
would have paid.
Yes, with
Yes. Carry on.
extended songs and all of that, concept albums, a lot of that is required. So I'm sure
Right.
it will happen soon enough. We are there, we're getting there. So,
Right. You were talking about decorum. I mean, that sort of reminded me of a book we were discussing at home. It was about Vishwabharati, the university set up by Tagore,
yes,
where
yes.
and there's some lovely memoirs about those who studied there, and
Hmm.
people like Said Mustafa Ali and all have said that question of decorum in Vishwabharati was different. I mean, the kid was allowed to wander. If in class a kid decided to wander and look at the birds, he or she would be allowed to do that, and it would be as to his or her choice
Yeah.
when she chooses to return to class physically or just mentally.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's when nobody was allowed to question this.
Hmm.
So, and surprisingly, it is this openness that bred a kind of discipline amongst the students. They realized themselves that this is the time we need to do this, and there is a time for everything. It happened so naturally. So you never had to impose
Yeah.
any kind of decorum or kind of thing. So that's a now these are ideas that we've well and
Well,
truly
decorum
failed
is
in.
control. Decorum,
Yes,
we use as
yes, yes.
control.
So
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 if you're not,
so these are
hmm,
ideas about which we should talk more often and ensure that we can sort of get back to them. We have well and truly failed Gurudev's legacy, but maybe the younger people will sort of resurrect it and save it. So Yeah, that was wonderful. I mean, it's we should. I wish we were allowed, or we could play some music
Music.
along with
Could have been,
what you
yeah,
just said, so that we would have had an idea of the spaces,
Hmm.
the kind Mark Knopfler creates with his finger picking style, and the kind of how it sort of gels with the lyrics he writes, and the story, the atmosphere he creates. It would have been lovely. But we should do that. One day we will. One day we will.
definitely,
We'll have to listen to
definitely.
your, we have to read bits and pieces of your thesis and play music in between, and do sort of,
Absolutely.
yeah, that would be
Yeah,
lovely to do, isn't it, Ashish?
absolutely. It would have been
Yeah.
more enlivening. Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
yes, that would be lovely.
I
So,
will do that for you sometime.
uh, now I want to ask Ashish something about writing his book on Louis Banks. And my question is, I have seen this in all the Indian musicians I've spoken to, from L. Subramaniam to Ranjit Barot and Amit Datta, the guitarist, and the others. Uh, they're all very uh, closely and intrinsically rooted to our music. In the sense, our, when I say our music, Indian music, all kinds of music, in the sense, film music, classical music, they've all heard it all. They've and So, and same with Louis Banks. I remember there's a bit in the book about, in your book, about Louis Banks remembering his mom singing these old songs, Nepali songs, at in the
Correct,
evenings after a day's
correct,
work, and
correct.
those tunes would come wafting in, and
Yeah,
and yet he goes on to become a jazz pianist. Amit Datta makes his own music, and he sort of, his guitaring is very Mediterranean, and he has his own complex compositions. They're absolutely brilliant. You need to listen to them, and yet, and Amit Datta is from the family of the great Rai Chand Boral, the doyen of Hindi film music rather.
absolutely.
So, so what is this? What do you think is this connection with the roots? And yet, they sort of are able to sort of simply sort of blow out
Yeah.
into the world and play a music with which, I mean, you know, Louis Banks and jazz. I mean, there's no reason why. Okay, Louis Banks has a dad who knew jazz, but then ask his dad, why would a gentleman, in Nepal and in Calcutta, would just feel
See,
jazz in his heart and soul? How does that work?
Louis. See, there's a your point is very valid because Louis Banks's grandfather was the composer of Nepali national anthem.
Wow.
So, a composer, the grandson of a person who composed Nepali national anthem, is quite likely to take Nepali roots and make music in in that tradition. But what actually happened, I personally felt that his father was so much into the jazz music, that Teddy Weatherford band in Calcutta, and he passed the what else the early years of his life in Darjeeling, and the Darjeeling is the place where the native music, indigenous music, that earthy music, and that Western culture in that Western clubs and all. So they too existed simultaneously.
Correct.
A person who was born and brought up in Calcutta and Darjeeling. So this Occidental and Oriental things which come up simultaneously. Now, when I listen to the music that he independently made in the jingles and all, I personally, when I was studying on him, I felt there are so many jingles. See, jingle is a section where he is absolutely on his own. There is no other person who is giving him the ideas. A music director might be taking idea from his music arrangers, so many other musicians, but a jingle of 1 minute or 2 minutes where all his ideas are only his own. In that brief present of 1 minute or 2 minutes, you get a fusion idea. So there are so many things where the earthy tune of that Nepali music or the Indian things or the proximity of Hariprasad Chaurasi and Shivkumar Sharma in R.D. Burman studio, and also in the evening time when you are listening to weather report, that jazz things are coming up. And
Right.
so maybe his predilection was for those jazz music because his father was a strict disciplinarian. So whenever he heard, there would be a thick
Yeah, rap
hit
on the
on the
knuckles.
string.
Right.
That goes. So he had to take up that thing, but that multicultural things, that multilingual things of music was always there. So he might be a jazz musician. He is a godfather of jazz, fine. But if you listen to his entire Hoover, if you find him from the first day to the day he is playing now, there is always a fusion strain. So otherwise, there would not have been it would not have been possible for him to fuse such diverse strains, harmonium and trumpet. It's very difficult, but it came so
Yeah.
naturally. So he grew up in an atmosphere, and he had it in his blood. The music of Nepal and the mother being Nepali and all.
Right.
So perhaps that is why he gave such
Yeah.
diverse
Yeah.
strain of
Yeah.
music. Yeah.
No, I understand. And it's as, I mean, if for listeners, we can imbibe so much. I mean, for musicians, it would be even more natural to sort of draw on consciously and subconsciously on influences
Yeah.
that they listen to. And
Hmm.
so we're gonna we'll just sum up now, and maybe if we have time, I'd like to sort of play a tune for you all if KLF agrees. It's we did a concert to launch the book, and Amit Datta, thankfully, and we were happy to sort of have him uh, sort of helm a band, and
Okay.
we did a concert to launch the book where songs from each chapter were played. So I have a
Oh, great.
we have a video clip of that. We'll play that, and but before that, and then we will move to question and answers. So Shobna, if you are the academic and you're the best speaker among us, so I
Oh,
shall very willingly and
Absolutely.
happily
no,
ask you to do a little bit of summing up on what all we accomplished today, on what we discussed, and
not
it would be wonderful
not
if you could do
for
that.
the reasons that you've cited, not at all, but because I think we're running out of time, and
Right, absolutely.
when I was listening to the two of you, a lot of ideas, and I pity my students because it's all going to be unloaded on them. I'm going to try this on class because I'm so jealous of you for having thought of launching a book with music from each chapter. I mean, it doesn't get better than that. I mean, it's absolutely
Absolutely.
brilliant, and I
Thank you.
think very soon we will be, filching some of your ideas there, to use your own word. And Ashish, when you were speaking about Darjeeling as a space, it really, caught my attention because I'm right now guiding a PhD dissertation where one of my students who's also listening right now is working on Bangalore as a space, and we were struggling with this. Why does music seem to have a very comfortable space in Bangalore? A lot of the big bands and a lot of there's a history, particularly the university that I come from. We can map the history of the last 50 years of Bangalore with bands that my university has produced. Very big bands and very, very well received musicians. And the answer was exact, it just there, this meeting point of Eastern, Western music,
True.
openness, and all of that, which my city resonates with. Bangalore is which has been the
Yeah.
downfall for Bangalore because we also sometimes lose ourself, because of the number of influences and also strength because, so that's beautiful. And I really hope, we all can take some of these projects forward, archiving
Right,
music and
right, right.
keeping it alive, not
Absolutely.
because of academic purposes, but because the musicians, I mean, are divine in my understanding. They're godlike and they need to be worshipped with due respect.
Absolutely. We
Which
need
I
more
think
of them. Right.
absolutely.
If we
And
probably
if
listened to them a little more, we would have been in a better place today.
absolutely, let's listen to them now before I get in the way of
Right.
that. Thank you so much to all of you who've tuned
Thanks.
in.
Thanks. We'll come back and take questions.
Sure.
Can we have the video now, please? Anyway, I think they're just getting it ready. And so, yes, all our cities, as we were just talking, that, all our cities sort of throw up this brilliant
Mm-hmm.
mix of, the music and the influences that sort of come up. When I was living in Pune, and I would be hearing these Lavani tunes, and they were all remixed and sort of done up uh, you know, jazzed up a bit, but they were being played all over the place, and it was so it was quite infectious. It was quite infectious, and one
Even
would
even
find
Louis Banks, even Louis Banks was what I'll say got the idea of Bangalore and Rama Mani to form the band Sangam. So
correct.
a person staying in Bombay, listening to the music from a lady of Bangalore, and then Sangam happened. So it
Right,
always
right, right. Louis Banks is actually a phenomenon, you know. It's quite something,
Totally.
quite something. And
Absolutely.
I keep saying this story, talking about this story. I watched them play with Dizzy Gillespie in Dalhousie Institute in Calcutta. We were in college
you're
then.
lucky. You're really
Yeah,
lucky.
and that was a concert I'll never forget. He played all songs, and I still remember A Night in Tunisia. And you know, before that, uh, it was the evening, and you heard uh, the sound of the azan come wafting through to the venue, and he
Oh,
stopped, and we all listened for a while, and then he said, and then sort of he played on as if taking cue from that.
wonderful.
It was just an amazing moment. I will never forget this. I keep telling that to Louis, that you know, you were on stage. I don't know if you remember this, and then that concert was so good.
I
uh,
heard Zakir Hussain do this once, at when he played at played a concert in a mall in Bangalore. I don't know why he did that, but it was at a mall. And wedding, procession went by. He actually stopped playing and kept the tal, the to the
Oh,
to
wonderful, wonderful.
and
well,
it was, how
right,
Zakir
right.
do
Anyway,
sing.
they're waiting for us to stop talking, I think, so they're going
Yeah.
to
Yes.
Somebody deceived you. Your heart's broken into pieces. Right now, I know how you feel. Yes, I'm with you, here for you. I know just what you have been through. Ooh, baby, I know how you feel. But don't forget about tomorrow. Put aside your sorrow and believe in me. I'm waiting here deep down inside you for my gun to guide you, bring you back to me. I love you, said I love you right now. I need you right now. I want you, said I want you right now. I love you right now. While you sit there, pretty baby, why don't you stop anticipating? Ooh yeah, I want to give love to you. Yeah, yeah. I'm standing here waiting, your tears falling down like raindrops. Ooh, I want to give love to you. Don't forget about tomorrow. Put aside your sorrow and believe the light inside you. Let it show the way. No matter how far you have fallen, you can hear it calling. This is what I said. I love you, said I love you right now. I need you right now. I want you, said I want you right now. I love you right now. I love you, said I love you right now. Said I need you right now. I want you, said I love you right now. I love you right now.
Wow, that was.
Yeah.
That's on guitar, on lead guitar. Parvez was the lead vocalist, along with Roop Shah and Jeffrey Rick. They're old-time Calcutta musicians. These Jeffrey and
Superb.
Amit and Parvez go back a long way. They played together in a band called the Shiva and many other bands. And Parvez is actually during. He was around during our time. He's younger to Amit, but he used to be on the fests and with us, and he's a great singer, lovely voice. So even a Santana song, when darkness comes and it surrounds you, there's a light inside you. Let it show the way. No matter how far you have fallen, you can hear the call in. This is what is said. I thought that was nice and sweet.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And so I just wanted to sort of say that I missed out a name while talking about Dr. L. Subramaniam. I was talking about Stefan Grappelli. So they did an album together called The Conversations. I wish I could play a tune. It's all those who are listening, just go back home and Google Conversations, and there's a video of Jean-Luc Ponty and El Subramaniam playing together. That was the time
Okay.
when he was in Bangalore and Delhi, and that's where I met them first time. And an amazing piece, and the two do it. The original is with Stephen Grappelli and Dr. L. Subramaniam, but Jean-Luc Ponty joins Dr. L. Subramaniam for the live show. It was just amazing.
Okay.
Anyway, so I think with that we will open up the floor to whatever questions we have. If yeah, Avilash Verma, it's been years since I graduated from Christ College, so really excited to catch this session with my favorite teacher. There, I told you, Shobna, you are a cat, super cat.
Thank you, Abhilash. Then that's overwhelming, really, to have people here. And music really is does that. I think it's
Right.
the
This
music
is
that
what
keeps us all together.
Abhijit Srivastava says. Thank you, Srivastava. Wonderful discussion, excellent conversation. Rashmi Ranjan Parida. Thanks to all of you for staying on. And most of it is because of Ashish and Shobna. They speak very well. They make me look
Oh,
good. So
Okay.
thank you.
that's
Thank
great.
you. Aditya Bharat wants to ask, how do you see fusion music and influence of Indian music on it? What about more research on music in our academia? Yes, the second question I think we answered. Shobna said that yes, we need more. About fusion, Ashish, would you like to take that first, and then I'll.
Yeah, how do you see fusion music and influence of Indian music on it? Well, Indian music is basically fusion music, right? So, if you try to find out the source of fusion music, it's very difficult to actually find the inception of fusion music because it was always there. So, it's very, and now, even in the present time, with all the uh, but I'll say that this is not just an Indian music; it's a world music existing in all parts of the world. So fusion music is almost the order of the day. So maybe so for our memory goes, so for our, what I'll say the consciousness goes, we can root back to my favorite one, Adivaman music, which is not actually the Indian one and not a Western one, and the fused
Correct.
one, a world music. But if you can look beyond that, there are some examples, not maybe not a plenty. And now it's very difficult to stay, what I'll say, stuck to one particular field. So it's surely when you are listening to music of all sorts, it has to be fusion music. It has to be an amalgamation of all the music that you are hearing all over the world. So when you are looking for the net, when you are listening to any particular music piece in YouTube, the simultaneous link which are coming up at the right side, they are of so various nature. So your sensibility is being shaped by all the influences that you are listening to. So it's quite a natural outcome that the fusion will be there.
Yes, absolutely. And we should now look at fusion music a little more strictly in terms, because there's all kinds of fusion music. I mean, you could play Robindra Songit using Western musical instruments,
Yes,
but sing
yes.
them in Bangla and have the tune. Don't mess with the tune, but you stick to the original, but play the song instead of a harmonium and tabla, but play it with Western instruments. A lot of Tagore's songs have their roots in Western classical music. So that
Okay.
could be done. So is that fusion? Yes, in a way it is. We had a band, we still have a band in Calcutta called Bhumi. They sing Bangla folk songs, but they essentially it's the folk song, unadulterated folk songs, but played with Western music. They have a guitarist, they have a keyboardist, they have a drummer, and it is the idiom is the Western music, and but the songs are pure folk. The songs are in Bangla. Sometimes they'll infuse. So that's again another kind of music. Then you have Shakti. John
Yes.
McLaughlin plays the guitar, and but there John McLaughlin's own knowledge and studying of the Carnatic traditions of the Indian classical has come into play. That is a really sophisticated version of fusion music.
True.
and it's almost, I would say, a new genre of music that they managed to create.
I'd like to
But
quickly add that fusion,
yes,
sorry, the fusion actually is conserving sometimes lyrics, like what Indian Ocean does with Kandisa. I mean, some of
right.
these pieces would be lost if it wasn't. So sometimes purists might have to deal with it, but it
You're
does a
absolutely
very
right.
important job.
You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. Yes, that's the other aspect of it. Absolutely.
Mhm.
I think that answers our question.
And
Your question.
Shantanuda, I tell it little lightheartedly that had Tagore been alive today, he would have composed music in keyboard and not the way he used to compose the time.
No, absolutely.
So
I had this discussion with Srikanto in the chapter where I said that Tagore would have won. I mean, how wonderful it would be to have the London Philharmonic Orchestra playing the tunes of, say, 10 Tagore songs. I mean, it would be a different experience altogether. Can you imagine
true.
different parts being written out for the cello and the violin and the drums and
Yeah,
all? It would be an amazing piece of music. Yes.
absolutely.
Any other questions? Should we call it? Oh, yes. Dominic de Cruz, music and other things. Great conversation. Great to see Amit and Jeff. Brilliant idea to have a live music going with the chapters of your book. Thank you so much, Dominic. Thank you so much. Great to have you with us. I think that's fascinating. Ashutosh Kumar Thakur. Thank you, Ashutosh. It's because of you this happened. Joita Ghosh, yes. My question is to Shobhana Madam. Madam, you said that your guide belonged to eco criticism, still, your experimental approach was accepted gladly. How the two disparate ideas went together, this is fascinating. We need more such guides. Yes, of course.
Very quickly, he is an enlightened person, and he's also a musician, and has worked on Tamil poetics, which contribute to ecology and eco criticism as well. So so I think it all kind of blended very beautifully.
Wow.
Someone to really look up to in that sense.
Hmm.
I'll stop with that.
Hello, Ishanti. So nice to have you. Ishanti, I must say, is a friend. She's joined from far away. Really enjoyed the. Thank you, Ishanti. Thank you, Ishanti. She's a great pianist. She used to play in our band. Can you believe it? In the
Oh, great.
college, and she was amazing. She's an amazing. She's a teacher. She teaches piano in school, and she's in Bangkok, I think. Joita, wonderful. I think there are no more questions, and I think we can call it a day. Is that all right? Yes, we are done. Thank you. Before we sign off, I want to thank Shobna and I want to thank Ashish first for agreeing to do this, and everyone at the Kalinga Lit Fest, the team, Ashutosh and Shitanshu and the others, everyone at the team. You've been wonderful. You've encouraged me to do this, and I'm really grateful. Very happy to have joined here. And get the book, get our books, get Ashish's book, get my book, read it. Tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like. Please tell us what you don't like, because that's most important. We
Sure,
won't make the same mistakes again. So
sure.
it's available. And I want to thank our respective publishers, Speaking Tiger for my book, and Ashish, you
Rupa for
must,
my,
Rupa,
Rupa for my book.
Rupa for Ashish's book on Louis Banks. And I hope publishers will be encouraged to do a lot more music books. And there's one writer waiting right here called Shobna Matthews, so they should immediately
Soon, soon.
grab her. Right. On that note, bye bye, everybody. Have a safe and sound
Bye.
puja. Enjoy yourself. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Hi.
Yeah. Hi.
Thank you for having such a wonderful session with Kalinga Literary Festival, KLF Bhava Samvad. So, as we have approached the ending of the session, I would like to mention that the book Calling Elvis compiles the detailed interviews of Shantanu Datta, the author, conducted with seminal artists. The candid, informed conversation with some enduring legends provide a rare glimpse into the minds of those trailblazers who influenced generations through music. The author's own life also emerges in vignettes throughout the book, which is an absolute treat to the readers. I would like to thank all our panelists, our guests for the evening today for having this wonderful session with us with Caleb Bhava Samvad. And I would also like to thank our lovely audience for the session.
Yes, of
Thank
course.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much. Thank you.
Thank you.